the other side of the bridge here in Brewster Pond here, so we're just getting ready to go paddle down to the portage there, and you can see around here the direction we're going there. So here we are heading down the portage here, and it's a pretty good trail here, as you can see. Always a bit of a workout there when you've got a board with you. So here we are at the launch here, going into the creek that will flow into the north end of Grey Lake. I've had to stop because of the damage from those rocks you can see. They've chewed up the rudder and done some damage to the board. I've assessed the damage and it looks like we can keep going. We'll take another look at it once we get to Grey Lake. Even though it's high water, the flow is very fast at this time. You're moving so fast it's very hard to see the rocks until you're on them. As you can see, steering around stuff is tricky in here, especially with the speed that we're moving. Well, this last kilometer between Brewster Ponds and where I am right now, and this is toward the end of the rapids, it's certainly been eventful. At the beginning of the portage there between Brewster Ponds and the fast water, I had my tripod fall over and it damaged the Sony lens, so I was down one camera. I didn't notice the error message on my Nikon until I got into the fast water. Well, there wasn't much I could do about it then. It looks like I had a faulty disc. So I pulled the disc out of the Sony that had the damaged lens and I put it in the Nikon. And that's not the end of it. The new GoPro battery I had installed went dead somewhere in the fast water. This has definitely been a comedy of errors. Very strong currents in behind me here. I'm just getting a little bit easier water here now. It's still flowing pretty fast. Well, with a few battery, camera, and disc changes, it looks like we're back at it again. When I look back at things, an inflatable board might be a better idea than a hard board on the Sayward circuit. In the lakes and the deeper sections of the creeks, I really think a hard board is fine. But certainly after experiencing that piece of fast water there, I question whether I'd want to do it again on a hard board. The water comes at you fast and the rocks come at you fast. The rocks are unavoidable. That section of water there is more designed for an inflatable. Finally cleared up and we get a beautiful view of the lake here, Grey Lake. It doesn't get any prettier than this. It's been wet all day and or cloudy, and suddenly it's cleared up for evening here. So you just maybe see off in the mountains there. Well, I got a chance to stop and get a better assessment to the damage on the board, and I also checked out my camera gear, make sure everything's all working, and see what kind of damage happened to my lens. It looks like I'm going to have to finish my trip at the end of Grey Lake there because of the damage to the board. I brought along a epoxy roll of polyester tape and sandpaper and could normally do the repair work at the campsite, but I don't know if I want to put the board through what it just went through to the north here. I have another section of fast water and it can be pretty rocky as well to the south. So I might consider maybe switching boards and getting an inflatable to finish the trip off. I decided that the value of this board was worth a heck of a lot more than to put it through any more torture and finish the trip off with it. So when you're using a little bit of common sense here, these boards are worth $2,500, and I've got an inflatable at home that is a lot less of an investment than that. So I think that's the direction I'm going to go. Going from Brewster Lake to Brewster Pond, you have to get around the Brewster Bridge log jam. There are several pullouts at the campsite, and you portage across Camp 5 Main. Then follow Green Main south to the campsite where you enter the pond. You will paddle to the southwest corner where you'll find the pullout for the portage. If you find it too mucky at the portage pullout, I'm going to show you a different route to take in the video. I traveled this route earlier in the season, but decided to revisit it to capture the missing video in the creeks. If you watched part 7 of the Sayward circuit by SUP, the Brewster Pond to Grey Lake saga, you will remember the problems I encountered in the creek. Up to this point, I'd used a hardboard throughout the circuit and avoided any damage. With the high fast water in the spring, all it takes is one mistake. I avoided any serious damage in the creeks, but that was by sheer luck. I made the decision to switch to an inflatable. This is the Brewster Pond pullout for the portage, better known as the Brewster Pond muck hole. I'm trying to find a hard landing to avoid the knee-deep mud. People have tried to put logs and planks down to make this a better landing, but they're all lost deep in the mud. The first section here it's a portage that comes off this little piece of water here, and you basically will have an entrance a few 100 yards, and then you're back in the creek. So one of the things we're going to have to watch when you're coming down the pond here at the exit, the start of the portage here, this stuff is like quicksand here, and I'd mentioned it earlier in the videos, so it might look innocent, but it's incredibly tough stuff to walk through. You'll sink up to your knees. What I've done, I've gone over on the brush side there, and I've dragged as far as I could, pushed the board as far as I could to the edge of the brush, and then worked my way out and stayed in the edge of the brush there. And you can see where the lilies are there. If you went out to where the lilies are there, you'd be sinking. But if you get to the inside edge of the brush there, it's pretty hard there. So anyways, that's a little bit of a warning. And here we have the start of our portage. Now this is the one that connects to the creek that goes into the north side of Grey Lake there. So there hasn't been a lot of traffic here by the looks of it. So, but the water was okay, just a little bit low on the coming at the landing there, because it is kind of a real nasty spot. Like I say, you can sink up to your knees. But this isn't too long, this distance here. A little better launching here than where we pulled out at Brewster Pond there. So water's a bit low, so we'll see how far we can get down here. It's not the best condition. I've seen this deeper. So we'll see how we do. See how far we can get going down here. There is an alternative portage route here when you're going out of the pond, Brewster Pond there, which is kind of over that direction there. You'll find it can be almost like quicksand. So if you come right to the end of the pond, it's a pretty good pull out here. And as you can see, you can just come up through here and follow this trail right here. The trail goes up, and then of course to the right there, and it'll head eventually to the put-in area there of the creek that of course flows into the north end of Grey Lake. I think this trail, if it got used a bit more, it would be, be cleaned up a little better, but it's still not in bad shape. I mean, I dragged a board down it, and it wasn't a big deal. It's not that far. So again, you have that choice. If it's really mucked up at the pullout,
for the what we call the official portage pullout, you can use this route and not get all mucked up. Probably scare the heck out of yourself when you start sinking up to your waist in muck at the other spot. This spot here, it's a solid pullout and it's a solid put in. So we're just coming to the end of this alternative portage here. And you know, there's one spot here where you're going to have to drop your kayak or your board down. I had no problem. You can see it here. So somebody put a rope here or something, it would really help. You know, and it would be easier to get down here. That's probably what I'm going to do. So anyways, there you are. There's the other spot right over there. So you have either to choose from. The creek, it can be deep and navigable at certain times of year, spring and fall, or it might be a challenge. It might even be dry in some spots, but you have to watch for boulders, etc. As you're heading down it, again, there'll be places where you might have to get out of your canoe or your kayak, you know, just because you're going to be dragging it. And as we get a little bit farther south here, we get into a little bit more navigable water as we get closer to Grey Lake there. So as you can see, the water's not super deep right now in the creek. So it's going to be a little bit of a workout getting down here. Yeah, it's a beautiful little creek, but it's just not deep enough right now, eh? It's I get a little bit of paddling and then I got to kind of drag it, so that's the way it is.
In the creek here, I am using a retractable rudder called a frogfish that is designed to collapse when it hits rocks, logs, and other debris just below the surface. I've heard it rattle a few times going over the rocks, so that's a big improvement over the solid rudder that I had on the hardboard. I actually did some damage to that rudder earlier in the year in this creek, and that's what motivated me to use the frogfish rudder. The last time I paddled through here in the spring, the creek was much higher and it was flowing a lot faster, but we're still making decent time. One thing about the slower moving current is that we're able to control our speed and steer around the bad spots. These inflatables are incredibly tough, just like the rotomolded plastic kayaks. But the advantage of an inflatable over a plastic kayak is the weight. It is a heck of a lot lighter. I've traveled the Sayward circuit and other routes in canoes, kayaks, and paddleboards. Different sizes and shapes and weight. And I'll have to say that the inflatable is best suited for this section of water. This is the end of the deep water. We're now going to have to get off the board and drag it. Still, this was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I've got a lot more paddling in than I was expecting.
Again, working our way down the creek here, you can see that the I just pulled up here because it's quite shallow. I'm going to have to drag for quite a ways here by the looks of it.
This is another test for the inflatable, having to drag it through the low water and rocks. I fed the board nose first with the current. This worked quite well, lifting the back end of the board in the air off the shallow spots. The paddle can be great support over the slippery rocks. Sometimes I had to reach ahead with the paddle to steer the nose around obstacles. I've done this section numerous times with different watercraft, but I definitely found the inflatable was the easiest.
So we got a small section here, we're going to have to drag it through, and then we get into the next little batch of good paddling.
The Sayward circuit is full of remote areas and aesthetic views. It also has the remnants of the early years of logging and the debris that was left behind, like these skidder tires that were left in the creek. There were also lots of elk tracks and signs of other wildlife on the edge of the creek. When I came through here during the deeper water in the spring, this was definitely one of the faster pieces of water.
Well, we're finally in the deeper water here, and we can start doing some paddling now. We've got the shallow spot up ahead there where it leads into the deeper water that goes into that channel that leads into the north end of Grey Lake. So only a short little bit there that we have to drag the board across. So we pretty much are done. So there we are, we've done it. We got through that. And now we get a chance to go into some decent stuff here up ahead. So this is the rocky section here, as you can see, And navigating through here, it's I'm probably better off than most boats. You can actually see marks on the rocks from the paint off of canoes. Well, we got through it. We're fortunate I got that frogfish rudder on. I could hear it pounding on things, so it allowed us to get through. We're about to enter Grey Lake. So we've completed the portage and the creek and the last of the shallow spots. And it's beautiful out here right now. Absolutely gorgeous.